Hi everybody, it's Alex Newton from K-Lytics, today with our Kindle market trends for November 2021. So let's have a look. We start with the overall market news where we look at the total number of the Kindle Select Global Fund. This represents the total amount of royalties paid to authors and publishers who decided to go exclusive with Amazon for a certain period of time. The royalty payouts in this Kindle Select Global Fund are public and serve as a good indicator for the overall health of ebooks on the Amazon platform. You see that we look back at a year 2020 where the total amount was 377 million, representing a 25% growth over the previous year, 2019. That was largely owing to the pandemic where ebooks in general and books overall benefited greatly from the lockdown periods. And in 2021, we have the actual numbers year to date for September. The total royalties paid out so far are 330 million. And since the share of January to September has been pretty constant over the last couple of years, we can pretty safely project that the year will end close to $450 million paid to authors and publishers under this fund. This will represent 19% growth, which is an enormous growth numbers when you compare this with so many other industries these days. The outlook for the whole year is therefore very good, a very buoyant market across many of the Kindle bestseller list. The overall market development, sales development, we'll look at in a second, genre by genre. The current situation in October 2020 with regards to the ranking of the genre has been unchanged over the previous month, with literature and fiction being the big umbrella category, and then the actual genre statistics start with romance, then mystery, thriller, suspense, and sci-fi and fantasy, then nonfiction, then teen, young adult. And this was a extraordinary month in the sense that across all those leading categories in the last column, the relative position of the previous month did not change. However, there is of course always movement within these bestsellers, and we'll look at some of these right now. Now, you don't have to take notes. You can download your free copy of this report at klytics.com/free report. That's k-lytics.com/free report. And if you're a member already, you can retrieve the report in the K-Lytics Basic tab of the members area. Let's look at the fiction market and the development within some of these genres. Let's start with the biggest one, romance. The top 100 sales rank performance over time, over the last 18 months from May 2020 to November 2021 has been very positive. Romance, after some dip previously, has climbed up. And if you look at this whole period from August 2020 all the way up to now, the top 100 sales rank average has been around 100 to 120 across the Amazon Kindle store. That is sky high. And this whole phase represents one of the highest plateaus that the romance category has ever achieved since we started monitoring the category in 2014. This very high level of sales has not come at the expense of lower prices for authors and publishers. In fact, romance ebook prices over the last 18 months, if you put a trend line through them, have continued to climb. And in October 2021, we achieved the newest highest ever. And the number becomes even more staggering if you plot this over the last 7 years. Here you have the Kindle ebook prices for the romance category as an average across the top 100 titles every month and monitored within the month over time. You see, starting in 2014, that's where we had pretty high price levels. But then there was a drop all the way to mid-2015, then ups and downs. The low point was clearly in 2017. In May, with $2.37 only as an average price across the top 100. Ever since then, we've seen a steady positive trend line, and you can see that we now reach this very high plateau, close to $5, and it remains to be seen whether we'll crack that magic $5 mark as an average price. Now, romance comes with more than 100 subcategories, and we recently published our romance update report for October 2021, where we covered these 102 submarkets in detail. One positive highlight where we now also looked at the longer term development is the category literature and fiction, genre fiction, erotica, romantic erotica. This bestseller list represents an interesting phenomenon because over the last couple of years, Erotica overall had a declining sales trend on Amazon, primarily owing to many of the advertising restrictions that you have. So it's tough to compete in a system where you have a pay-to-play marketplace. But you see, ever since that point in April 2019, when we had the low point during the pandemic, if you now put a trend line through this, the category has come back up significantly. Another interesting bestseller list at the cross-section of romance and science fiction and fantasy has been fantasy romantic, often simply referred to as fantasy romance, where the average sales rank has improved significantly over the last 18 months, with the main drivers being a cross-section of, say, paranormal romance type of literature, books like Zodiac Academy, Demigods of San Francisco, then teen young adult type of fantasy romance, or fantasy with a dash of romance like A Court of Thorns and Roses, and a lot of, say, fae romance, elf romance, and dragon shifter type of books. When you plot this category on our K-Lytics strategy map, where every dot is a category and the higher up it is on the scale left-hand side, the better the sales rank, the further it is to the right, the higher the level of competition. We see the category science fiction, fantasy romantic has currently a sales rank of 281 on average in the top end, and the category size is only about 6,000 to 7,000 titles, so it falls into this segment, what we call hot niche markets. And yet another one to mention in romance, Werewolves and Shifters. This is a 5-year graph where after a longer term decline for werewolf and shifter romance, we've seen again, ever since the first hit we had during the pandemic, we see this very strong upward trend in the whole category. So anything to do currently with werewolves and shifters, that's been doing very well. Moving on to mystery thriller and suspense sales, they have also seen a very positive development over the last, say, 4-5 months, ever since May 2021, June, July, August, very strong upturn after a period that was pretty flat, high selling but flat during most part of the pandemic. Just prior to the uptick in sales, there was a drop in prices almost across the board, but they've come back up to a normal level with an average price of around $6 across the top 100 in the MTS bestseller list. One of the strongest categories within it are domestic thrillers. The bestseller list is already ranking sky high with an average in October, November 2021 of around 200 as a sales rank average across the top 20. And you see there's very positive trend line. What makes this category so attractive is that the average sales rank is so high with this 185, so it's very high up on the map, but the category size is still small with only 2,509 English-speaking titles at the point of this video recording. In other words, it is a bestseller list, very well worth checking out. And also worth mentioning is the recent upturn. Here is a 5-year graph of the average sales rank of traditional detectives in the mystery category. Now, these books are not necessarily cozy. There is a cozy mystery category and various subcategories in it. This one is more broadly defined, and I thought you might find it interesting to see that upward motion. Science fiction and fantasy sales rank performance has also been very positive. This is the last 18 months that you see with a very steady positive trend. Good news for sci-fi and fantasy authors and publishers. Prices have been very stable, if not slightly trending upwards. So the sales increase or share increase did not come at the expense of huge promotional pricing. And overall, it can be noted that during the pandemic, here again, you have a 5-year graph with the light gray shaded area on the right-hand side representing the pandemic. We observed that, say, darker read, here is the post-apocalyptic and the dystopian categories. These type of categories have clearly suffered over the last 18 months, while more escapist type of literature, such as epic fantasy, has clearly shown a strong upward trend over the last 18 months. Now, mind you, also the epic fantasy category is a bit of a catch-all category, so it's not just classics such as Lord of the Rings, quite the contrary, but it gives you an indication for this escapist theme that you find across these types of books in general. Also, more tactical categories such as video game adaptations, TV, movie, video game adaptations in science fiction and fantasy are worth mentioning for their upwards trends. And if you're interested in the full picture, we just this month released the overall science fiction and fantasy category report together with 2 top 100 bestsellers analyses and covering in total 174 submarkets in sci-fi and fantasy. Then teen young adult, let's take a closer look. That category has suffered a bit in recent months. It's always been a bit more volatile, but ever since April, May 2020, we see a bit of a declining trend. Again, though, you have positive examples as well. Just one example, fantasy, fairy tales and folklore adaptations. This could be romantic fairy tale retelling, such as, let's have a look in the bestseller list, Cinderella retelling, the Sleeping Beauty retelling. You see these examples. Last not least, to mention about fiction versus non-fiction. The news is that literature and fiction has always seen higher sales than non-fiction on the Amazon Kindle platform, but the relative distance between the red line literature and fiction and non-fiction in the past has always been almost like a parallel line. The blue line non-fiction always more volatile, but not like on a long declining trend. But this is exactly what's been happening ever since May 2020. We reported on this before, and there's a bit of good news that just in the last month of November 2021, we see this upward tick. So the mathematical trend line is pulled slightly up, and we're obviously all curious and anxious to see what's going to be happening towards the end of the year. All right, so much for today. If you'd like to have more data and get the latest data on 7,000, in fact, right now, 8,000 categories, or any of our genre reports here on the right-hand side, I invite you to have a look at the pricing tab of our website at klytics.com. That's k-lytics.com. So much for today. This is Alex Newton from Klytics, ebook market intelligence for success. Bye for now.